Let me just introduce our panel today. We have Dr. Akil Shah. He's Associate Professor of South Asian Studies at the University of Oklahoma. We have Dr. Tamanna Salikuddin. She is the Director of the South Asia Program at the USIP. We have Mr. Rajiv Sinha, who is a Distinguished Fellow at the Observer Research Foundation. And of course, we have Dr. Shalini Chawla, Distinguished Fellow from the Center for Air Power Studies. So with this, I think we should just simply jump right into the discussion. Welcome everybody to this first of a series of events that ORF is planning around the neighborhood. We intend to do one such seminar every month, dealing with one country in the neighborhood. We are calling this series the Neighborhood Scope. And of course, I think we are starting quite naturally. The first one is going to be on Pakistan, simply because I am an old Pakistan watcher and I find it the most exciting country in the world. There's never a dull moment out there. And I often say that it's the best reality show in the world. But clearly, a lot of action is taking place out there right now. The Imranian revolution, if it can be called that, seems to be petering out. The army is back to calling the shots. But it's not very clear that with all that is happening, there is one view that political stability might just be returning, but there's another view that political stability and certainty is likely to be elusive for not just the foreseeable future, but even beyond. There are very serious questions surrounding Imran Khan's fate and whether he will have any kind of a role in Pakistan's politics in the future and what that role might be. Also, what's going to be the glide path of the country in the weeks and months ahead. After all, the political turmoil is just one part of the story. There is a massive economic crisis which is hanging over the country. There is a massive security crisis which is brewing. And Pakistan's foreign policy is nothing to write home about. But the main question right now is whatever Imran Khan has done, has anything really changed? Has he actually dented the system even a little bit? Or was it just sound and fury? And the phenomena has fizzled out. So having said that, let me just start with Akil, because he is somebody who is not just a scholar on Pakistan, but has written an excellent book on Pakistan, which deals with army and democracy, which is really in some ways the nub of the problem right now. So Akil, in your assessment, do you think the army is back in the saddle, in the sense that not that it ever really quit, but it seems to have come back in a way that everybody seems to be kowtowing to it, everybody seems to be seeking favor of the military. And yet there seems to be a sense that maybe the army has been bruised, it's been dented and damaged by what has happened. And they also seem to have lost some of their constituency, especially among the elite sections in Punjab. But how do you look at how the situation has been evolving right now?
He provoked the army. He called the army chief things that nobody else has called him openly, like a traitor and a coward. He's been picking on active duty officers in the ISI. So in that sense, I think the military was on the back foot. It was under pressure for Imran Khan. And I think the May 9th events did provided that opportunity to sort of come back with a bang and reassert its power. This notion that was the military was sort of, couldn't really counter Imran because, he has a vote bank. He's one of apparently the most popular leader in the country. So this was really an opportunity for General Asim Munir to sort of close ranks, rally his troops around the flag, and obviously portraying May 9th events as 9/11 or the January 6th insurrection. So if there were any doubts in anyone's mind about internal dissent within the army, I think General Asim Munir has used this opportunity to sort of stamp down on any dissent within the ranks, but also more broadly, which is why you see this sort of, beloved army, the sort of trying to evoke the army's sacrifices and its status in society as the most sort of beloved institution in the country. So it's sort of, the army trying to reassert itself and signal to every civilian or to every civilian sort of stakeholder that we are still in power and we still retain the ability to act collectively as an institution.
If I just turn to you, from what Akil is saying, that the army is trying to recoup its image, recover its lost ground. But this is not the first time something like this has happened. Maybe the scale is different. Maybe the kind of abuse that Imran has heaped upon the army is different. But if you go back to what happened in 1977 when Bhutto was overthrown, and what Bhutto did just after he was released, going on those whistle-stop tours, his speeches, his private conversations where he was quite scathing against the generals. Apparently, he even warned Ziaul Haq that he'll take action against the generals, and at least it's an apocryphal story that he said that I'll tear off his mustaches and make him tie his shoelaces or whatever with those mustaches of those famous mustaches of Ziaul Haq. So that's happened in the past as well. But looking at it from an Indian point of view, what is your assessment? Do you think the army will be able to recover lost ground? And do you think that it is, in fact, just a hiatus in Imran Khan's political journey, or is it curtains?
Shan, thank you for inviting me. So even though the military I feel has been seen as losing its prestige, clout, but one thing which has been very clear, that despite all the perceived differences within the military institution, I think the military has emerged as a unified force to deal with this crisis emerging from May 9 event. I feel that May 9 events actually unified the military. And because it was the direct hit on the institution, and we have seen that in Pakistan, that military has religiously guarded its position in the eyes of the people, and that has been one of the crucial determinants of Pakistan's strategic posturing. Now, what I feel that, there will be definitely number of efforts from the military to regain its prestige, its image. And I feel we will see it on different layers, and we can see already that the PTI members who are exiting the party, or for that matter, even the political space, are driving two crucial messages. One is condemning the May 9 events, and second is glorifying the military. So apart from this, the militaries obviously will going to try hard, I feel, to be aggressive on the PR, to glorify the institutions. Efforts to remind the country about the sacrifices of the military definitely will be there. Second, I feel that the military, I think, will expand its presence in various sectors, and we have already seen it has demanded 1 million acres of land in Punjab for corporate agriculture ventures, whatever. And thirdly, I feel that the military will definitely demonstrate its military power. So which could come, for example, in the form of anti-terror operations, maybe not right now, but I think these are 3 or 4 factors. Apart from this, I also feel that what is not unlikely is that General Asim Munir, who's going to now pull up all the strings in his favor, tighten his grip, will also an ideological fervor in the army, like what Ziaul Haq did to unify the army when he did it in 1980s of Islamization of the military. Something of that impact which brings the ideological fervor back into the army is something not unlikely.
Where does that leave Imran Khan? Will the army find place for him or no?
I mean, I don't see him occupying the political space. I mean, anything can change in Pakistan, but as of now, his appeals, his indirect apologies, his request to negotiate, talk, nothing has been entertained. So it looks like that he will get a harsh treatment, and maybe PTI stays with a faction which is according to the military's diktat, but Imran Khan, I don't think will have a political space.
Tamanna, from DC, that old saying, I think it was a cliche, but even then, Allah, Army, and America. So I think America is keeping quite silent about what's happening. It's a little surprising because normally the US would always come up, say something. Okay, there are some 60, 70 congressmen who've written letters, but we all know that doesn't mean much. What's the buzz in DC? What are people saying? Because we don't even see, normally the Americans would run scared. Something really rotten is happening in a country, nuclear armed, etc., etc. None of those things seem to be affecting, it's a pretty blasé attitude in DC. But that's the way we look at it. But how are you looking at it? What's the buzz?
I think that's absolutely right. Thank you, Arif, and thank you, Sushant, for having me. I think that's absolutely right. I think we are, and I applaud my colleagues, talking to my colleagues at both the White House and State Department, where I served in the past. In the past, especially in the last 20 years, U.S. policymakers were in a place because of our presence in Afghanistan and because of the policy focus on Pakistan. We couldn't help ourselves. We had to comment. We had to get involved. We had to call somebody. And I think because of where we are right now in terms of lack of policy focus on Pakistan, it's actually a good thing that we're not getting involved. There is no upside. There's no benefit for the United States to come out and speak on one side or the other. I mean, definitely Imran Khan's team is lobbying hard. They're lobbying across government. And that's why you saw that letter from Congress, which, again, I agree with you, doesn't hold much water. But I think there is this sense that I actually think it's a good policy decision on the U.S. part not to speak out on this. We are not part of this crisis, which is, thank God. Usually we are somehow implicated in every crisis. So right now we aren't directly implicated. And I think it's a smart policy decision not to actually comment. There's no upside. If you come out on the side of the military, you lose. If you come out on the side of Imran Khan, you lose. And I think the very minimal interest that we still have, we still use the airlines of communication. We still use the ground lines of communication, obviously in a much lower level than we have in the past, but it still exists. I think if I'm thinking about the whole poly crisis, you could talk about the political, the economic, and the security crisis right now in Pakistan. There's a sense in Washington, and my sense is that Pakistan will muddle through, that they have seen multiple, crises before. This one may be different and of a larger scale, but they will muddle through. What we're worried about, I think, is that they'll come out weaker, more distracted, divided, and more susceptible to, obviously, the conspiracy theories. But that weakness, that division doesn't necessarily allow them to pay attention to anything besides the near-term politics. But I just want to comment a little bit on the crisis itself. Right? Why was this crisis so different? I think the level of popularity you see of Imran Khan is quite astounding. I think his use of social media has really done that. I think, just a few months ago, I was in Karachi, and there is no alternative in a lot of these spaces. You go to Lahore, you go to Karachi, people who didn't vote before, members of retired military families, upper middle class, women and young people who were not interested in politics saw a pathway to change the establishment in Imran Khan. So I think a lot of them will be disappointed. I don't think that's enough to carry the day. The other thing I think that Akhil and others pointed to is the military cohesion, how this directly impacted military officers, retired and sitting, his popularity in North and Central Punjab, where the military, recruits and where that's the military's heartland. I think the last thing, and this comes back to Washington, Pakistan is more isolated now in the foreign policy sense than it's ever been in the last 20 years, right? I mean, it's not like the Saudis and the Emiratis are rushing to even the Chinese are not bailing them out. The United States is not lobbying at the IMF as we might have done in the past. So they're far more isolated, which makes this particular crisis feel more acute. But I would argue, some people have said this is like 1971. I would argue it's not. Imran Khan doesn't carry a cause or a grievance like 1971, like Mujibur Rahman did, like the Bengali movement. This is an intra-elite conflict. I think that's important to remember. I mean, somebody noted how many of the judges, military generals, and Imran Khan's party all went to Atchison, right? If you talk to people in Balochistan and Sindh, they're like, you're just cutting off our social media. We don't care. This is not our conflict. You didn't rise up when we are jailed, when we are missing. This is really an intra-elite conflict without a real sense of deep grievance. I mean, obviously they're against the military establishment, but Imran Khan is only against them so far as the military establishment abandoned him. He's okay as long as the military establishment is behind him. And I think that lack of grievance is what you see when the military has really come out hard now. You see people falling away, right? You see lots of the messaging from the military is not just to the public. It's also within the military, to the corps commanders, to the rank and file, that this is where your bread is buttered. This is where you'll get your retirement. This is where you'll get your plots of land. Don't forget that, right? I think maybe since 2008, post Musharraf, there was this kinder, gentler military. We all sort of forgot the real face of the Pakistani military in that the hard power. They were ruling from behind the scenes. What we see now, I think, is that real power back in your face, military coercion, intimidation, controlling social media, mass arrests, this huge propaganda campaign in every major Pakistani city now. There's hoardings everywhere with huge faces of, Army Chief, DGISI, all of this stuff. And I think that is really the true face of the Pakistani military. I don't disagree that Pakistan will come out weaker, but I do think it can muddle through.
That's a good segue to what I have to ask Rajiv, because Rajiv has been in government, and I sense that many people in the Indian government are quite reassured by the fact that the military is reasserting itself in the way it is. Somehow I get the feeling, I might be wrong, but maybe Rajiv can tell us whether, as a former civil servant, you are feeling more reassured that the military is back, in power, it's reasserted itself, because it brings with it a certain predictability, a certain certainty, even with all its adventurism and all the other nasty stuff it does. There is a certain predictability to the military coming back. So one, as somebody who was until recently in government, are you reassured that Pakistan is in safe hands, if I might say that? And secondly, what Tamanna said, that there is this growing weakness in Pakistan. In fact, I would say that Pakistan is in safe hands and becoming weaker is ideal for India. Would you agree?
Well, Sushant, you promised to ask me a question which I'll have a difficulty answering. Well, okay. The Pakistani army is a fact of life, whether you like it or not. It has a legitimate supervisory role in the governance of Pakistan. The Pak army is the cementing factor of the Federation of Pakistan. Jinnah kind of called it the home for Muslims. But today you have a situation where a Baloch Muslim or a Pashtun Muslim or a Sindhi Muslim is not willing to live together in that confederation. There are problems. I'm sure we'll all agree with that. So how does that happen? What happens then? The Pak army is the cementing factor of that federation. So to answer your question that whether I'm more comfortable with the fact that the Pak army is really asserting itself, no, I'm not. I mean, it doesn't make a difference to me whether the Pak army is there or not there, as long as Pakistan behaves like a normal state, which it does not. But yes, the Pak army does, to quote you, provide a certain sense of continuity as to what's going to happen in Pakistan, quote unquote you. So yes, there is that comfort factor that Pakistan army will do things in a certain fashion, but I don't believe that. The Pakistani army has said so much and done something totally different. So I think there is this huge credibility gap that exists as far as India is concerned. There's no doubt about that. So it's inevitable that Pak army would have asserted itself. Look at the stakes that it has. It owns Pakistan. Pakistan doesn't own the Pak army. So if you keep that factor in mind, then look at the stakes. As Tamanna just mentioned, that's where you get your plots, that's where you get your promotions, that's where you get your apartments, that's where you get your agricultural land, that's where you get your post-retirement jobs, which pay you so well. And which young man who joins the army wouldn't want to be in the shoes of his senior? He aspires to that. That's natural, it's human. It's very human nature to aspire to something that you see your seniors do and achieve. I don't see why he should be short-shifted of that. So yes, there are stakes. And as far as yes, it's a fact that Imran Khan on the social media is a phenomenon. There's no doubt about that. But that phenomenon is because he's been able to use that so effectively, which the army has not been able to do, or which the government has not been able to do so effectively. But while I agree that he has been able to make inroads into the urban elite, into the Pak army families and everything, but all through the crisis in the last 1 year, I have maintained that the Pak army will come out of it. That the Pak army is not a divided house. There are differences, as in any organization. Any organization where there are 4 people or even two people, there are differences. No 2 people can agree on everything. 100%. So here is the Pak army, which is the 5th largest army in the world. So of course there will be differences of opinion and approaches, but it's an institution, and when an institution decides on a policy, it's accepted, no matter what you say or do, no matter what your differences are. So while there are differences within the officer corps and maybe at the subaltern levels, and the families are involved too. But when the orders issued, they all follow. They fall in line, no matter what you say or do. And the Pak army has differences, but it's not split down the middle. That is why you see the May 9th events came as heavenly sent manna, where it was a heaven-sent opportunity to hit back and assert. Listen, we are the guys here who have sacrificed for this country. We've got martyrs here, and you're abusing them. You want this entire state address to collapse completely, which will happen if the cementing factor goes away. So I think the Pak army is not split down the middle. There are differences, but it has been able to come out of this low level of denting that is faced. It's been dented. Yes, its reputation has been dented, but is not damaged or destroyed. And I don't. What we see is a repeat of what's happened in the past, where the army comes out. But there is a difference today. Let me also point to which I perceive is the fact that Tamanna, you spoke of a softer, gentler, kinder army. But today, I think we're seeing that happen. This is the age of social media, where everything comes out instantly on your phone. It's there. So what have we seen here today? What we've seen is there were times when people were wondering, is Asim Munir actually in control? How is he handling all this? Here is this former prime minister who's kind of accusing him of trying to have him killed. How can he handle that? But look at the manner in which Asim Munir kept quiet, did not do anything which is in your face, and went and quietly did what he had to do. May 9th came as an opportunity. He acted swiftly and without any pity for anybody. And I think that's what we'll see. As we'll see the army get greater, move into the thing, into a position of strength, you'll see the army doing things in a very quiet, low-key manner. I don't see Pak army behaving the way Musharraf did or Zia-ul-Haq did. No, those days are over. Those days are totally over. So, to answer your question, I think I have answered your question. I'm always in one.
But I hope you have sufficiently provoked Akil, because I can see he's not somebody who would probably, or he would certainly, I would imagine certainly have a lot of pushback to what Rajiv just said, and love to hear your pushback.
Yeah. So one thing, if I heard Rajiv right, was this notion that the Pakistani army has a quote unquote legitimate supervisory role. I don't think there is any major political party in Pakistan or major, social movement like the PTM that actually accepts this role as legitimate. Now, de facto, yes, these parties have to negotiate with the military, sit down, because in a sense, that's the sort of most certain route to power. The problem with this notion that the Pakistani army is somehow the glue that holds the country together is precisely what the military wants Pakistan to appear as, right? That if the army goes, Pakistan will, just collapse, and you will have nukes in the hands of bad guys. But at the same time, it's the Pakistani army's sort of domination that drives the resentment, the alienation in Balochistan, in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and now Punjab too, right? So Imran Khan's sort of ingress into the what you want to call pro-military or military-aligned families has brought that notion home. I talk to my friends in Lahore, or they're like, "What is happening? Why are they doing this?" I'm like, they were doing this throughout all this time, but it wasn't because they were doing it in Lahore. And now you finally woken up. The other thing I wanted to point out was that post Musharraf, the army, especially in the period where Imran Khan was in power, the army did apply sort of a repression across the board to the opposition, to the media. The Pakistani media right now is much freer and it was when Bajwa was in control and Imran Khan was in power. I mean, there were cases of abductions and shootings of journalists. The media was much more sort of micromanaged. You couldn't really say things. You would get instructions from the ISPR of what to say, what not to say. People were taken off air. Popular journalists were taken off air for saying the wrong thing. So in a sense, this is coercion more directly applied. You see sort of, military courts and the military getting directly involved because the PTI or PTI supporters attacked some of the sort of key symbols of the military legitimacy. As someone earlier said, the notion of martyrdom, sacrifice, right? Shaheed, as well as the GHQ and the Corps Commander's House. So I think in a sense, what I wanted to point out was the military was never soft. What it was doing, that it was applying repression through other means, like, repressing the media, manipulating the judiciary more effectively to get what they wanted to do. But when that failed, the repression was always there. Now it does seem that because it's directly an outcome of what happened on May 9, we see the military's role more visibly. So at that time, they had this notion of plausible deniability, which was not very plausible. But we do see the military's gloves coming off more sort of, in a coercive fashion right now. Thanks.
Tamanna, just to take off from where Akil left and where Rajiv left, and I think the consensus seems to be that, yes, in many ways, the army has been able to reestablish its dominance. Now, traditionally, DC has been very comfortable dealing with the Pakistan army. Is that the case even now, or likely to be going forward? Because if you have a very messy democracy where people like Imran Khan or even Nawaz Sharif or anybody else are going to be standing on, this whole thing that we will not, what Imran Khan's acolytes used to call absolutely not syndrome. So you don't have absolutely not anymore. How does that work for the US going forward?
I mean, I think the US will deal with whoever can deliver for them, right? Right now, US interests remain on nuclear security and stability. They remain on counterterrorism, and they remain on preventing any escalation between India, Pakistan, and China on strategic stability. So we will work with whoever can deliver those, right? I think often in Pakistan, the US is accused of being the one who props up the military. I actually find that a very I think it's a very simple argument. You can look at our civilian leaders often turn to the military to prop themselves up, and the military takes this role. I mean, when I was in government, we turned to then Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif to try to get something done, and he couldn't deliver. Literally, he came to us and said, well, you have to talk to the army chief. Now, when your civilian leaders are so, and I'm not saying that in a normative way, that that's a good thing. That's a positive thing for Pakistan or for democracy, but it's the reality of how business is done in Pakistan. And for the United States, it's not that we have some sort of strategic alliance or strategic convergence. It's much more that we have very specific things that we need to get done and that we care about. And so there it comes back to expediency. And so if Pakistan military is the one that has the relationships, has the power to take care of these things, we'll still continue to work with them. I think it's important to note, though, that Imran Khan didn't make any friends in the way that he dealt with the United States, right? So we're willing to deal with your prime minister, but if your prime minister is going to talk against the assistant secretary of state, who is honestly the biggest proponent of the U.S.-Pakistan relationship, and make him a persona non grata, it's very hard to do business. So you shoot yourself in the foot. And I wouldn't underestimate the negative feelings after 20 years of war that both sides have, right? So anti-Americanism plays great inside Pakistan, but the anti-Pakistan feeling in Congress in Washington is quite high because of 20 years of friction during the war in Afghanistan. So I wouldn't underestimate that. Just one point to come back to Akhil and Vikram talked about, this has happened before. I lived in Pakistan during the end of the Musharraf era. Soldiers were advised not to wear their uniforms outside, right? People would boycott the funerals of martyrs. I mean, this was a whole nother level of anti-military feeling. Now, it wasn't on social media. It didn't have a face like as charismatic as Imran Khan, perhaps, but that same structure came into power to try to, when Kayani came back, to revive the military, this back to barracks, let's remediate the image of the military. And that you'll probably see that, right? You'll see the military cobble together a new civilian government, hold its elections, but do something to prove to the country that it is its savior. And I agree with Akhil that it's not necessarily its savior, but it wants the entire country to believe that they can't survive without them.
No, so if it wants to behave as the savior, does it open up a front with India? That's one. And secondly, are you telling me that all the money that Imran Khan is wasting on lobbyists in DC is going down the tube? Is that the case?
He should save his money. It's not working.
It's not his money, though.
It's not his money. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. He's more popular in the diaspora than he is at home, I would argue. That in the US, if you talk to the average Pakistani American, they cannot see anything wrong with Imran Khan, but they would never go live in Pakistan. So,
I just have a small question on US-Pakistan. Can you hear me? Yeah. I think So, I mean, you talked about some dimensions of the relationship and where the focus, but lately in the last, say, 1 or 2 years, mainly after US came out of Afghanistan, what we have seen that, there has been a change in the engagement, engagement dimensions have been redefined. So there is a shift from the security dimension to the areas like, human security, climate change, investment. So a lot of those things have been talked about. And we have seen a lowering down of the security dimensions, whereas the Pakistan military and even the Pakistan civilian leader we saw talking about, the military aspect, getting the military equipment. So in your view, and also Akhil, if you could, if I could hear your views, what will you think the Pakistan military do to kind of bring this back and revive this engagement and focus on the security dimension? I mean, will that happen? And if that has to happen, then how do you think, which direction the efforts are going to go?
Basically, how does Pakistan start earning the geopolitical rents once again? Is that right? Yeah.
Would you like me to go first, or? I mean, I'm happy to talk about it. I mean, I think we're going to be in this restrained relationship. In the US, they say this is a normal relationship, right? Like we do with every other country. We talk about climate change, we talk about vaccines, and it's done at sort of the ambassador level. It's done at a deputy assistant secretary level, but there's very little policy attention beyond that level. So gone are the days when our senior, our Secretary of Defense our chief of the Joint Chiefs is calling the army chief, monthly or biweekly. Those days are really gone. And I think it's largely because we spent so much time on Pakistan for 20 years and in a lot of policymakers' eyes, we're not able to accomplish the things that we wanted to. But also there's this, so that exhaustion is there. But let's be honest, there's now this Indo-Pacific focus on India. And so that is, even though it's not a zero-sum game, the Washington policy attention is distracted, whether it's Ukraine and Russia, China, India, Indo-Pacific. So Pakistan finds itself in that policy seam. It is not mentioned anywhere in our national security documents that just came out. I do think there's one theory that the next crisis is what brings us back, right? It's some exogenous impact, some external crisis where you start getting that rentier state back. Now, what that looks like, I can't forecast. But I mean, if you look at the cycles of US-Pakistan relationships, it's usually some exogenous crisis that draws us back in.
What's your take, Akhil?
Sushant, I wanted to go back to an earlier comment that Tamanna made about the U.S. role in Pakistan. I mean, I agree with Tamanna that, it's not as simple as the U.S. propping up the military, but there's a long history of, sort of engagement, military to military ties. I once asked a senior diplomat in Islamabad, an American diplomat, I said, why do we have every important American delegation, taking photographs with the army? And that doesn't send the right signal. It's obviously, and Pakistani civilians think, well, the Americans really are sort of prefer the military. And his response was, yeah, see, the prime minister was busy, which I think was BS. So there is this habit of dealing with the military. You pick up the phone and you say, you're with us or against us. There's not been one Pakistani military dictator that the Americans have not been in love with. I mean, Ayub, Zia, and then Musharraf. So while it's true that Pakistan's sort of civil-military imbalance is of its own making, the United States has reinforced that pathology by continually engaging or sort of, pragmatically saying, well, this is the only institution that works. Well, if you think that's the only institution that works, that's the institution that's going to work. So you're sort of reinforcing the Pakistani military's perception also that, it's the army that talks to Washington. It's the army that can deliver. So it's a sort of a vicious cycle. But I just wanted to comment on Tamanna's.
I would agree with that, and I think it's not just attention, but it's also resources. I mean, the U.S. has poured resources into the military, into the intelligence services, and so it's a vicious cycle that reinforces itself.
On the U.S.-Pakistan relations, I agree with Tamanna. Pakistan doesn't really have much to offer the U.S. right now, right? So you had during the quote-unquote war on terror, you had Al-Qaeda that you could sort of bring out one Al-Qaeda member every month. And so you could, engage the U.S. has strategic interests. So as Tamanna said, unless there is some, exogenous shock, the only interest that the Pakistani military, I think, would be willing to sort of, exploit as this U.S. need at some point in Afghanistan in counterterrorism. But I don't think the U.S. really needs Pakistan, exclusively to achieve its counterterrorism goals in Afghanistan. So in a sense, the Pakistani strategic importance is dwindled radically since the Americans left Afghanistan. Thank you.
Just you pointed out a fact that I said that it was a Pakistani friend of mine who told me recently that the Pak army has a legitimate supervisory role.
I don't know who you're friends with, Rajiv.
Oh well, this guy, I won't take names, but he's
friends are not very reputable people. They're probably some dubious character.
It's a dubious guy to deliver, so it's all right. So see, the point is, yes, this legitimate role has been reinforced in the manner which the international community has also been dealing with the Pak army. As you rightly said, they're the ones who deliver. And yes, if I want something done in Pakistan, and if I know the Prime Minister can't do a thing, I have to talk to the army. That's why you see anybody who goes and pays obeisance at the GHQ too. He meets the chief first, and then meets the foreign minister or the prime minister or whatever it is, and the prime minister too busy, as was mentioned. So yes, I think that has further reinforced the propaganda which the Pakistani army also uses to its own benefit. The other thing I wanted to ask Tamanna and Akil, both of you, was this issue of Pak nuclear possessions. Okay, now what is the US thing? Does the US have a handle on it? What is it? What are the US concerns on it? Does it have a handle? If yes, okay. If not, then what? Where are we headed?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the one issue that still remains at the top of policy lists is the nuclear issue. And I think if you heard General Bajwa very clearly messaging, because the U.S. concerns are really about long-range missiles, whether it's being able to target Israel or other countries, allies of the United States, so long-range ballistic missiles, but also tactical nuclear weapons, right? So those are the two most important issues. Obviously, security of nuclear weapons. I think in 10 years, we've actually seen progress from a US perspective, progress in terms of security. I think our issues remain on the first two. And so that's where you see conversations happening. Unfortunately or fortunately, most of the things where we cooperate are done quietly. So you never see them. All the issues where we lack convergence, where we fight in the US-Pakistan relationship, those are all very public. So most of the issues where we are doing okay or we're finding progress is there. I think it's interesting. I mean, is there a deal to be had on range and on tactical nuclear weapons? I don't see one right now. I think the Pakistani military really protects those assiduously. I think SPD and GHQ, ISI have their own tussles, but in the end, those are the crown jewels of the Pakistani military and the Pakistani state. So it is very hard, even in those very tough negotiations. Pakistan is not necessarily engaging with the U.S. on those things, right? So we try on the margins. I think it's a very tough problem for U.S. policymakers there.
Which brings me to Shalini, to you, because you've done a lot of work on the nuclear issue. And from what Tamanna is saying, I would look at it somewhat more counterintuitively. My point is that, yes, I agree that Pakistan would want to protect its crown jewels as assiduously as possible. But, there are huge problems facing them. The economy is virtually in a meltdown state. And there is no way it's going to come out of the situation in which it is without massive restructuring, which does not seem to be possible in the near-term future, even in the medium term. And with all the political and other problems, with the economy tanking, we don't know how it's going to play out on the street. So which leads to my question to you, that don't you think this is an ideal time to get, for want of a better word, a firmer handle over Pakistani nukes and using the economy as leverage? Do you think it's even possible that something can come out of it, or do you think that's a mug's game?
No. So your question is firmer hand on the nukes by the
using economy.
Pakistan using the nuclear.
No, not Pakistan. If Pakistan had to use that money would have already come.
Yeah.
The money is not coming. The West using, or the US in fact using the economy as a lever to say that, okay, fine, we'll bail you out some, but we need a firmer handle over the nuclear weapons.
I think in all my study on
think out of the box and think imaginatively.
The Pakistan military, I think they are pretty. They guard the nuclear weapons with complete sincerity. So I don't see, first of all, any laxity there. So this whole, talk about falling them in the hands of jihadis and all, I don't believe it. That's not going to happen. And even if you talk about this perceived, divisions within the army, I don't think that's going to impact the nukes, the safety. They are safe and secure and they stay there. US trying to use that. I think the IMF came up with one of the conditions saying that you can't the long range missiles, but we saw the reaction was pretty harsh. And even in the past, post 9/11, we saw how the discussion went on in terms of the locks and other things where Pakistan has guarded that. And we have China behind this also, so we have to keep that factor in mind. So I don't think that US can use this leverage at all against Pakistan. They will not, because there's too many dynamics attached to the nuclear weapons. That is something that makes them stands out as the leader of the Islamic world, and multiple other factors are there, so they will guard it. The question related to this is what I want to ask both of you is, now what we have seen in this whole crisis, Pakistan not, being able to get the IMF loan, there is definitely a much more increased reliance on China, and we will see more rollovers from China maybe in the coming months or years ahead. That also implies shrinking reliance on United States. How do you think this equation now impacts America's ability to question or, ask, question or maybe, question Pakistan's strategic calculus at any point in time, which we have seen in the past. Now, given the fact that Pakistan is not taking the security assistance from them, it is not even reliant economically on the West, how does that impact the American ability to influence Pakistan's strategic calculus?
I'm guessing you're pointing that at me. First of all, I agree with you. Look, we've tried in the past to talk about nuclear weapons. I think it doesn't go anywhere, right? Like, I agree with you completely that it's a fool's errand. You can try. They're not going to engage in that negotiation with the United States. We've tried a lot of different ways. I'll leave it at that. I worked at the White House as director for Pakistan during the time when we were giving them the highest level of civilian assistance and the highest level of military assistance. And we still didn't impact their strategic calculus, right? So let's be honest, I would say changing their strategic calculus is not that simple. And changing any country's strategic, you're seeing all these debates. Can the US get India to come in on a Taiwan? Every country has its own strategic calculus, and it follows that strategic calculus. So I think changing Pakistan's, it doesn't matter how much money we're actually giving them. We haven't been able to buy a lot of change. You can buy tactical help. I think that is the worry in Washington. There is an active debate right now. Is Pakistan so far down the China camp that we shouldn't even have relations? And most would argue no, given that it's the fifth largest military in the world, fifth largest country in the world, has nuclear weapons. We have interests in the region. We should at least have relationships. Look, we still have, despite the small relationship, we're still one of the largest export markets for the United States. We have the largest, huge diaspora, huge people-to-people ties. We have business interests. I mean, there is still a lot of quiet things that go on that keep the US at least there. It's definitely not at the same level. The worry in the US is, as you mentioned, on China. Every month, China is rolling over that debt. What are they getting in return for that? I mean, what are you giving them at Gwadar? What are you giving them other places? And I think that's a really important question, that China continues to roll over the debt month to month. It's a negotiation every month. And so what are the Pakistanis giving them? And I think that's an opaque question for us, but one that's what policymakers are focused on that worries them.
We are running out of time. So what I want to do is put a question to all four of you, which is, how do you see, and starting with you, Akhil, how do you see things unfold from here on? Let's look at the end of the year. Do you think there'll be elections? Do you think there will not be any elections? If there are elections, do you think those will be credible elections? And if elections are not held, what kind of constitutional gymnastics are we likely to see? What happens to the judiciary? Will it be strangulated, or will it be able to assert itself? Basically, how do you see things unfold from here till the end of the year? Because normally, I think in Pakistan, everybody is looking at what's happening tomorrow or the next week. So I am asking you to do some crystal ball gazing for a couple of months down the line. but I'm sure you are equipped to do that. So first off the blocks, Akhil, let's hear you.
So my guess is that there will be elections. There's no way out unless, as you said, the military establishment decides to sort of implement a plan that has been, under discussion for a long time, which is the Bangladesh model, sort of technocrat caretakers backed by the military. But I don't think that's feasible constitutionally, and it won't be acceptable, broadly speaking. If there's an election, let's say in November, and I'm pretty sure that Imran Khan's party by then would have been sort of decimated. Khan might be disqualified or not be able to participate. That would put a big question mark on the credibility and legitimacy of the election, because no matter what you think of Khan, if you take this party out and you sort of tear it down brick by brick and divide it into factions, no matter how free and fair the election is, there will always be a big question mark. The higher judiciary itself is quite divided, and then there is a Imran Khan fanboy club. The Chief Justice is, very fond of him. When he shows up in court, he's like, "So good to see you. Good luck." And there, some inroads into the families of the judiciary, and he's popular amongst them. But there's also a second faction of the judiciary that is not amenable to, they're not like, Khan's cheerleaders, and they'll behave differently. But at the end of the day, if the military has decided that Imran Khan will, at least for the time being, not be a major player in electoral politics, there really isn't much the judiciary can do. We already see signs that the judiciary is retreating. The Islamabad High Court told one of the PTI leaders, please hold a press conference if you want bail, or, there's no way out. So the judiciary knows its limits, I think. And the Pakistan military has made it very clear that it's sort of back in charge, not that it ever left charge. So my guess is there will be elections, but regardless of how they're conducted or how the votes are counted, which is always a big question, if PTI is, if what the military is doing to the PTI continues, any question of a free and fair election would be is out of the question. It won't be a free and fair election. It won't be perceived as such.
How do you see the future unfold? And I'll just take off from where Akhil left and put in a supplementary. That so what if elections are not seen as free and fair? Pakistan has had elections whose credibility was questioned even in the past. That didn't affect the governments that came into being. Imran Khan wasn't exactly the best election or the most transparent election. So what if another, tainted election is held? Life goes on, right? But how do you see?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, I monitored Pakistani elections in 2008 and 2013, and look, there's no question. 2018 elections, people found them as Imran Khan would not have come to power without the help of the military, right? So you can't deny that. I agree with Akhil. I think talking to my team on the ground, and I'll be in Pakistan next week, so I can confirm. But the sense is that the next phase of sort of the military, it's rehabilitating and remaking some sort of coalition that you're going to cobble together and hold elections by October. You've already seen Punjab has been asked to provide a budget for only 4 months. So right now in June, people, they'll present budgets, but if a 4-month budget means you're going to hold elections after that. So I think the center also will only present a 4-month budget. This is all signaling that you will have elections. I think you will find the electables already. Look, all of these people who left PTI, the electables, they've been coerced. I'm sure the military and ISI have large files on them of blackmail. They were coerced to join PTI, or they were incentivized to join PTI. So why can't they be incentivized to join someone else? I think that's pretty normal. So you will likely see elections with some sort of weak coalition put in place. It will be really important how they deal with the economic crisis. I mean, we saw Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif call the IMF managing director. I think they're going to be able to restart this IMF program, but there are still gaps. The Saudis and Emiratis have promised $3 billion. I think maybe the Chinese will give them, but I think they are not going for any big reforms. This will be month to month managing this crisis. So you're not going to come out of a crisis in some beautiful way. You're going to have month to month. The election, I think the interesting part will be that popularity of Imran Khan on the street among populists when they see that he is disqualified from elections. What is the reaction, right? Now, if the military will lock you up for protesting, will use Army Act, will ban social media, then what is the real outlet for that anger? And I think that's the real question. How are they planning to manage the anger around the elections when Imran Khan can't participate? But I think they feel rest assured that they can do it, right? That even these past protests, they petered out very quickly. Maybe a week or so, and then things were back to business. And I think they hope that they can do that in the future.
Like Sushant said, elections in 2018 were not credible. They were called Selection 2018. So finally, the political party, what we have seen, will come into power, which has military on its side. So I don't see any change in that. Yes, they might have elections in November. I personally feel it might be delayed a bit more than that. Regarding I just have one, point on the anti-establishment sentiment, which exists in Imran Khan, encashed that very well. And that has been there for decades. It's always been there, the anti-army sentiment. But the bigger question is is that sentiment capable of bringing a change in Pakistan? That has never happened. And I don't see that coming back into the whole picture and changing the dynamics. But we will see military gradually gaining control, asserting itself, change in the dynamics with China and United States. So I think next 6 to 7 months, these are the factors that we'll see. On India, can I just make a point? I think
I want a Q&A after this. So a 10-minute Q&A. So just quick.
So I'll hold it then. I'll just start it.
Rajiv?
Yeah.
Okay. The army never left the scene. The army was there, is there, will be there. Elections, yes, elections will be held. When? The pointer is budget for 4 months and thereafter? Possible? Well, maybe. What's going to happen? It's going to be another election in Pakistan. It doesn't matter how they are perceived. It's always a selection. What happens? Okay, Imran Khan is very popular on the social media, but will that popularity actually convert to votes when elections happen? We've got to see that. We don't know for sure. Look at the manner in which the movement petered out. It just fizzled away. I mean, Zaman Park was crowded, and today it's a graveyard with just a few dozen people inside who he wants to hide. That's it. So in the future, how do we see things happening? I don't see any political party getting a majority in any election. It will be a party, there'll be a large party, there'll be a large number of seats, and there will always be a king's party that will be the kingmaker. That is how the establishment has always controlled governments. Look, Nawaz Sharif came with a majority, and what happened? He turned up to be totally unpalatable. So was Benazir. So I think that's a given. So we will see a king's party emerge. Will the PTI be decimated and destroyed completely? I don't think so. Imran is obviously not going to stand for elections. He'll not be part of the elections. That's a given. I don't think there's any space for him left on the political spectrum at all. So what we'll see, maybe we'll see Jahangir Tareen come up and create and take over the party. That's fair enough. He was wrongly or rightly, cast aside, but he's got this chance to again put in a petition for a review in the next 60 days as per the new amendment which was passed yesterday and signed by the president, the Supreme Court Act 2023. So it's a distinct possibility that he would come back. So I think the point is, the most important thing here is the economy. What's going to happen on the economy? How does Pakistan get out of it? And I agree with you, Tamanna, it'll be a month-to-month face-to-face decision. There is no appetite for any major reform in economic terms. They don't have the wherewithal, they don't have the plans, nothing. I don't think they even have the human resource to even go ahead and think about it in the first place. So the economy. The other factor which is equally important is the security aspect. Look at the manner in which the TTP is running riot in Pakistan. It is amazing. And yet, if you look at it, the Pakistani army, despite resolutions in the National Security Council Committee and everything, that they're going to start acting against them, there is no sign of any operation against them. And I think this is largely because... Sorry?
Go ahead.
Sorry?
I would just note that while this is all going on, they did do an army operation in Balochistan and airstrikes within Afghanistan against it.
Yes, but that was in the past. But of late, see, in the last 2 or 3 months...
in the last few weeks, actually.
This month, the TTP has said we have perpetrated the highest number of attacks ever in our history. 70 attacks in the month of May, which is huge. You know what I mean? So, and I think another reason, and this is what I've been told, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there is a strong reaction and protests being held in KP against the idea of another military operation. So that's why the army is kind of not really stepping into that minefield yet. Maybe in due course it will. But I think what's happening in Islamabad and how to handle Iran and the political situation, and that's keeping it more busy than anything else. So that will be another factor which will have an impact on the outcome of things.
So I just want to, I think we overshot our time, or are going to, but by about 10 minutes. But I'll just say 2 sentences before I open the floor. One, I don't think anybody can take over Imran Khan's party. That's impossible. You can have another party coming up, but I'm not sure they'll get the votes which Imran Khan got. He might have ridden on the shoulders of the Pakistan army, but I think he has become popular, or he has his own vote bank, which is undeniable. But his popularity on social media, I think on that one needs to be careful. Actually, Musharraf was insanely popular on Facebook. I think he had some 7 million or some 70 million followers. And when he landed on the back of those followers in Karachi, I don't think there were more than 70 people to receive him. So social media can be extremely misleading. Exactly. But the floor is open. If anybody has any questions, we have about 10 minutes. And please identify yourself. And if you have a specific question for a specific speaker, please say that. Yeah, please, sir. Go ahead.
My question is to Tamanna.
Can you identify yourself?
I am Atul Gandotra. I am from healthcare. But I am from J&K, Jammu and Kashmir, which is India's integral part. So my question is that when patient is in ICU and needs euthanasia, how do you help the patient to survive and why?
Okay. Any other questions? Please. Can you switch on the mic, please? The button.
Question with Rajiv, though anyone else can answer as well. But I would like to understand your views, since now Pakistan is geographically vulnerable in drug trafficking as well. And with the kind of things economically, the state is absolutely drained. And the way it is still continuing and impacting this drug trafficking through drones and all of the kind of ways in India. What are your views on this? How can we kind of counter it, and how is it still, how do you perceive it is still able to continue, because you are specialized in Afghanistan as well, and both these countries are prone to these kind of things. Thank you.
Pakistan's geostrategic position is Pakistan's geostrategic position. You can't change it. The geography can't be changed. Pakistan, there is this transfer of drugs from Afghanistan to Pakistan to India. It is there. We know that. There have been a large number of instances of drones being used to drop in weapons and drugs into Punjab, and also into in J&K, in Jammu as well. Well, this is the Pakistani deep state way of keeping India tied down by trying to resuscitate the Sikh movement or whatever it may be, right? So that's something that, how do we stop it? You stop some things you don't stop, because not everything can be stopped. So I think greater vigilance and it needs to be taken to ensure that whatever is coming, you can capture and hold most of it. But some things will come through, and that's a given. Until we kind of get into a situation where we have a Canada-US-like situation on the border, I think This will continue.
But it continues on the Canada-US border also.
Well, there you are.
So,
So it will continue whether you like it or not.
was your question to anybody specific?
I started off with Tamanna.
Tamanna, the gentleman's question on the fundamental contradiction that we were talking about the army, but asking about elections. How does that
Sure.
fit?
I mean, we could look, democracies being autocratic, and I think we find this all over the world. I mean, we could look at Sri Lanka, we could look at Bangladesh. What is your measure of democracy? Is holding elections, status of institutions. Pakistan, people have been talking about its demise since it began, and it has not, I don't think it's on the verge of state collapse. It will continue. It hasn't, its judiciary has its own flavor. Its civil society is strong. Pakistan is a big country with a lot of different parts to it that might defy a very coherent narrative, and yet it continues. And there are lots of parts of Pakistan that are going about their business and aren't worried about this tussle today. So yes, the economic thing is very bad. I would say they're probably in rolling default right now. But I think we're more worried about it. When you talk to leaders in Pakistan, they think they have it under control. They think on the security side, they've seen this before. I don't think that's necessarily true, but I think they can muddle through. Yes, elections happen and people vote for who they vote for. Is that your measure of democracy? Maybe not. But I think it's the reality of Pakistan, but it's the reality of other countries. I mean, historically, we can see Turkey or Indonesia, and lots of countries have this. So I don't think it's anomalous in that sense.
If there are no more questions, I think we can call it a day. Thanks a lot, Tamanna. Thanks a lot, Akil, Shalini and Rajiv. Great having you guys over. I'm sure we'll do something else again in the near future. And certainly like to have you guys over once again. Preferably physically. But if that's not possible, I don't think virtual is that bad also. So some things the pandemic has gifted us are not so bad. And we should be thankful for small mercies. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Thank you both. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.